The elk didn't know it was being watched. 1,200 yards across the Snake River Valley, the bull stood motionless against the autumn backdrop of western Idaho. 6 points on each antler, maybe 800 pounds. A perfect specimen. Through the Schmidt and Bender scope, Sarah Mitchell could count the individual hairs along its shoulder, see the fog of its breath in the October morning air. She pressed her cheek against the stock of the Remington 700, her father's rifle. 24 years old, the wood worn smooth by 2 generations of hands. The scope's reticle settled just behind the elk's front shoulder, rising and falling with her breath. Sarah was 27 years old, 5'3", 118 pounds soaking wet. Her brown hair was pulled back in a tight braid. Her green eyes never left the scope. She'd been in this exact position since before dawn, watching the valley, waiting for the shot that mattered. The Kestrel weather meter clipped to her jacket read 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind 8 miles per hour from the west. Humidity 62%. Elevation 6,200 feet above sea level. Her mind did the calculations automatically. Had been doing them since she was 12 years old. Range 1,200 yards. Her load 168 grain Sierra Match King bullets. Muzzle velocity 2650 feet per second. At this distance, the bullet would drop 14.2 minutes of angle. But the cold bore shot from a rifle that had been sitting in 38-degree air all night would fly slightly different than a warm barrel. Add 0.3 MOA. The crosswind, 8 miles per hour at 90 degrees was full value. At this range, that meant 18 inches of drift. 1.4 minutes of angle right. Humidity was high for Idaho in October. Increased air density. Minimal effect, but she added 0.1 MOA elevation anyway. Then there was the Coriolis effect. Shooting south across the valley, the rotation of the earth would drift the bullet slightly right. 2 inches. 0.2 MOA. Final dope, 14.6 MOA up on 1.6 MOA right. Sarah dialed the elevation turret, clicked it precisely. The scope's internal mechanisms responded with quiet precision. She adjusted the windage, set it, checked it twice. Her breathing slowed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, in, hold. Between heartbeats, that's what her father had taught her. The world exists in the gap between heartbeats. That's where impossible shots live. She felt her pulse in her neck. Thump, pause, thump, pause. In the pause, she squeezed the trigger. The Remington bucked against her shoulder. The suppressor reduced the crack to a sharp cough that echoed once across the valley and disappeared. Through the scope, she watched the bullets trace a slight shimmer in the cold air. 1.4 seconds. The elk dropped instantly. Clean kill. Ethical. The way her father had taught her. Sarah worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing. It clinked against the rocks beside her hide. She didn't pick it up immediately. Instead, she stayed in position, scanning the valley through the scope, looking for other elk, other hunters, anyone who might have heard the shot. The valley was empty, just her in the mountains and the river below. She finally sat up, joints stiff from 3 hours of motionless waiting. The brass casing was still warm when she picked it up. Federal Premium, .308 Winchester. She'd loaded these rounds herself in her apartment in Boise, weighed each powder charge on a scale accurate to .02 grains, seeded each bullet to within .001 inch of consistency, because that's what mattered at 1,200 yards. Consistency, precision, attention to details that most people never even considered. Sarah Mitchell was a ballistics analyst for the FBI's forensic laboratory in Boise. She spent her days examining bullets pulled from crime scenes, matching them to weapons, testifying in court about rifling marks and firing pin impressions, and the science of terminal ballistics. Nobody at the FBI knew she was the daughter of Jack Phantom Mitchell, Navy SEAL, scout sniper. Legend. Nobody knew she'd been shooting since she was 12 years old. That her father had trained her on this exact rifle in these exact mountains, calculating these exact corrections for wind and distance and the invisible forces that push bullets off course. Nobody knew that 3 years and 7 months ago, her father had died in what the Navy called a training accident at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. And nobody knew that Sarah still came to this cabin every October, still shot her father's rifle at distances that made other hunters laugh, still heard his voice in her head every time she squeezed a trigger. Between heartbeats, baby girl. That's where you find it. She packed the rifle carefully into its case. The hike down to the elk would take 40 minutes. Field dressing another hour. She'd have the meat processed in town by evening, most of it donated to the local food bank. She didn't hunt for sport. Her father had taught her that too. If you take a life, you honor it. Use it. Don't waste it. The cabin sat on the south bank of the Snake River, 3 miles from the nearest paved road. Her father had built it himself in 1998 before Sarah was born, before he'd made SEAL Team 3, before he'd become the Phantom. It was small, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a main room with a wood stove and a kitchen area. No television, no internet. The only phone was a satellite unit that barely worked half the time. The walls were decorated with things that told a story if you knew how to read them. A photograph of her father in desert camouflage somewhere in Iraq, 2007. His SEAL trident in a shadow box. A combat knife with a Kydex sheath hanging beside the door. A map of Afghanistan with certain areas circled in red ink. Sarah spent every October here. 2 weeks away from the lob, away from Boise, away from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. She was pulling her boots off on the porch when she noticed the vehicles. 2 black SUVs parked in the gravel area beside the cabin. Government plates. Tinted windows, still running. Sarah's hand went instinctively to the Glock 19 on her hip. She'd had a concealed carry permit since she was 21. Her father's influence, his training, be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everyone you meet. The cabin door opened before she reached it. Commander Marcus Webb stood in the doorway. 62 years old, gray hair, cut military short face weathered by 3 decades of salt spray and desert sun. He wore civilian clothes but stood like a man who'd spent his life in uniform. Sarah had known him since she was 8 years old. Uncle Marcus, her father's best friend, her godfather, the man who'd given the eulogy at Jack Mitchell's funeral while Sarah sat in the front row dry-eyed and silent, not believing any of it was real. Sarah, Webb said. His voice was exactly as she remembered. Calm, controlled. The voice of a man who'd given orders in gunfights and hostage rescues in situations where the wrong word could get people killed. Commander, she didn't holster the Glock. This is a surprise. I know, I'm sorry. We need to talk. Behind Webb, another man appeared, older, late 50s, tall and lean with the quiet economy of movement that marked a certain kind of operator. Wyatt Stone, the man said. He didn't offer his hand. Most people call me Flint. Sarah knew the name. Gunnery Sergeant Wyatt Stone, Force Recon, Marine Scout Sniper. Her father had trained with him at Marine Scout Sniper School in 1995. They'd served together in Afghanistan. Her father had mentioned him often. Flint was your father's spotter in Helmand Province, Webb said. 63 confirmed kills over 7 months. Your dad pulled the trigger. Flint called the wind. I remember the stories, Sarah said. She finally holstered the Glock. What's this about? Webb stepped aside. Let her into her own cabin. Both men had been inside already. Sarah could tell. The wood stove was burning. Someone had made coffee. A metal case sat on the kitchen table. The case was aluminum. Military issue. Battered and scarred. Sarah had seen it before years ago in her father's gear room. We need your help, Webb said. I'm a ballistics analyst. If this is about a case, you need to go through proper channels. It's not about a case. Flint moved to the table, rested his hand on the metal case. It's about your father. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd spent 3 years avoiding conversations like this. 3 years refusing to let people tell her stories about Jack Mitchell, about his missions, about the man he'd been when he wasn't being her father. My father's dead. Yes, Webb said quietly. He is, and we need to talk about why. Flint opened the case. Inside was her father's SEAL trident, the golden eagle clutching a trident and pistol and anchor, the symbol that meant everything to the men who earned it. Sarah had seen it 1,000 times. Her father had worn it on his dress uniform, at her high school graduation, at her college graduation, at every important moment of her life. Beside the trident was a notebook, black leather, worn, the kind field operators carried for notes and sketches and information that was too sensitive to put in a computer. And beneath the notebook was a single bullet, .308 Winchester, subsonic round, 175 grain. But this one was different. Someone had used a rotary engraver to etch words into the copper jacket. For the devil. Sarah picked it up, turned it over in her fingers. The engraving was precise, professional, her father's handwriting. There's a letter, Webb said. He pulled a folded piece of paper from inside the notebook. He wrote it 3 weeks before he died. Gave it to me. Said if he died in anything that looked like an accident, I should bring you this case and read you this letter. Sarah's hands were steady when she took the paper. That surprised her. She unfolded it carefully. Her father's handwriting. Blue ink. Precise block letters. Sarah. If Webb is reading this to you, then I'm gone, and the thing I've been afraid of has happened. I'm sorry, baby girl. I'm sorry I can't explain this in person. I'm sorry for a lot of things. 3 years ago, I was part of a mission in Afghanistan. The target was a man named Marcus Delgado, former Delta Force. He'd gone private, started running weapons to the Taliban, high-end stuff, Stinger missiles, Russian night vision, American body armor. He was making the Taliban more effective. Getting our boys killed, we almost got him. 99% mission success. We had him cornered in a compound outside Kandahar. I had him in my scope. 1,200 yards. Clean shot. Then the mission was canceled. Direct order from high command. Stand down, extract immediately. No explanation. Delgado disappeared. I spent 2 years trying to find him again. 2 years digging into why that mission was canceled. 2 years asking questions I shouldn't have asked. I found things, Sarah. Things about people in our own government who were protecting Delgado. People who were getting paid to look the other way. People who would kill to keep those secrets. If you're reading this, they've killed me. The bullet in this case is special. I made it myself, subsonic. Subsonic rounds are quieter, but they're harder to shoot at distance. More affected by wind, more drop. I spent 6 months perfecting the load, testing it. This bullet will hit where you aim it at 1,247 yards. Exactly 1,247 yards. That's the distance from a specific ridge south of El Paso to a specific tower in Mexico. I measured it 3 times. I know it's precise because I've been there. I've glassed that compound. I know Delgado's patterns. I know where he stands every morning at dawn. I trained you for this shot, Sarah. Every long-range session we did, every wind call, every calculation, I was training you for this specific shot at this specific distance. Because I knew, somehow I knew I wouldn't be the one to take it. You're the only person I trust to make this shot. The only person with the skill. You're a better shooter than I ever was. You just don't know it yet. If Webb comes to you with this case and this bullet, it means Delgado is back. It means he's doing something terrible. And it means you're the only one who can stop him. I know you never wanted this life. I know you wanted to analyze bullets, not fire them. But sometimes we don't get to choose our gifts. Sometimes our gifts choose us. Make the shot, baby girl. Between heartbeats, trust your training, trust yourself. I love you more than anything in this world. I'm proud of you every single day. And wherever I am, I'll be watching. Between heartbeats, I love you. Dad. Sarah read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and set it on the table beside the bullet. Her hands were still steady. Her voice was calm when she spoke. Tell me about Delgado. Webb and Flynn exchanged a glance. Then Webb opened the notebook. Inside were surveillance photographs, printed on standard copy paper. The images were grainy but clear enough. A compound in the desert, adobe walls, guard towers, armed men in civilian clothes carrying military weapons. Marcus Delgado, Webb said. He pulled out a photo of a man's face. Late 40s, strong jaw, salt and pepper beard, cold eyes. Former Delta Force, served from 1998 to 2008. Honorable discharge after he got caught running weapons to Iraqi militias. Army wanted to court-martial him, but someone higher up intervened. He walked. Who intervened? We don't know. That file's been sealed tighter than anything I've ever seen. Your father spent 2 years trying to get access. Never could. Flint pulled out another photo. After the Army, Delgado went private, started working for the Sinaloa cartel as a tactical consultant, trained their sicarios in close quarters battle, taught them how to fight like Delta operators, made them the most effective cartel in Mexico. Then he went independent, Webb continued, built his own organization. Los Diablos, smaller than the big cartels but more professional, more disciplined. They run weapons, drugs, and people across the border. But their specialty is high-value kidnapping. Sarah looked at the photos. The compound was well defended. Multiple layers of security, good fields of fire. Whoever built it knew what they were doing. 48 hours ago, Webb said, Delgado's people grabbed Ambassador Richard Crawford in Ciudad Juarez. He laid out another photo. An older man in a suit, late 60s, distinguished looking, military bearing. Crawford's a retired Army colonel, did 3 tours in Iraq, good man. Been ambassador to Mexico for 2 years. He was visiting border facilities when Delgado's team hit the convoy. Killed 6 security officers, took Crawford clean. What does Delgado want? $200 million, plus the release of 8 cartel members from U.S. prisons. That's not going to happen. No, Webb agreed. It's not, which means Crawford dies. 60 hours from now, Delgado sent a video making it very clear what happens if we don't pay. Sarah picked up the surveillance photos again, studied them more carefully. When were these taken? Your father shot most of them in August 2020, the month before the mission was canceled. She found a photo showing the guard tower Webb had mentioned, the one her father had written about. She could see the elevation difference between the tower and the ridge to the south, could estimate the distance. 1,247 yards, she said. Exactly. Flint tapped the photo. Your father was obsessive about that number. He measured it with a laser rangefinder 3 separate times. Always came back the same, 1247.3 yards. Sarah set down the photos. What happened to my father? The question hung in the air. Webb looked older suddenly, tired. March 2021. Your dad was running training exercises at Camp Pendleton, taking a team through Bethlehem warfare drills. His vehicle went off a cliff road. Single vehicle accident, rolled 300 feet. He died on impact. You don't believe that? No. Flint pulled out his own phone, showed Sarah a photograph, crime scene image, a winding mountain road, skid marks, broken guardrail. I was first on scene, Flint said quietly. 20 minutes after it happened, I was running a different exercise in the same area. Your father and I were supposed to meet for dinner that night. He swiped to another photo, close-up of a vehicle's undercarriage. The brake lines were cut, professional job. Hydraulic fluid was drained slowly so the brakes would work fine at first, then fail catastrophically on the first hard braking. On a mountain road. Another photo, the hillside above the crash site. I found this 300 yards uphill. He zoomed in on something small in the dirt, a shell casing. 300 Winchester Magnum. Sniper round. Someone shot out his front tire just as the brakes failed. Made sure he went over. Sarah felt something cold spreading through her chest. Not grief, not anymore. She'd processed grief over 3 years of nights in this cabin. This was something different. Navy CID, she asked. Closed the investigation in 48 hours. Called it an accident. Refused to examine the brake lines. Lost the shell casing, I logged into evidence. Your father was buried with full honors and everyone was told to move on. Someone in the chain of command, Sarah said. Not a question. Someone high enough to shut down a SEAL mission in Afghanistan, Webb said. Someone high enough to bury a murder investigation. Someone who was protecting Delgado 3 years ago and is probably still protecting him now. Sarah picked up the bullet again. For the devil. She turned it over in her fingers, felt the weight of it. Her father had loaded this round specifically for one purpose, one target, one shot. One. Why me, she asked. SEAL snipers can make that shot. Marine Scout snipers can make it. Why bring this to a civilian? Webb and Flint looked at each other again. It was Flint who answered. Your father and I talked about you 2 weeks before he died. We were drinking bourbon in his office at Coronado. He was quieter than usual, distant, like he knew something was coming. Flint's voice was steady, but Sarah heard something underneath it. Grief or regret. He said, if something happens to me and Delgado surfaces again, don't send a team. Send Sarah. She's the best shooter I ever trained. Better than me, better than you. She has a gift, and she doesn't even know how rare it is yet. She's the only one I trust with the devil's headshot. The devil's headshot, Webb tapped the photo of the guard tower again. That's what your father called it. 1,247 yards, 15-degree downward angle, average wind 12 to 15 miles per hour. Delgado stands in that tower every morning at dawn, supervises the changing of his guards. Same time, same place. Military precision, even though he's a criminal now. Your father spent months calculating that shot, Flint said. Every possible wind condition, every temperature variable, every factor that could affect the bullet's flight. He was obsessed with it, because he knew he'd only get one chance. Sarah set down the bullet, walked to the window. Outside, the Snake River moved silently through the valley. The mountains rose on both sides, eternal and indifferent. I'm not a soldier, she said. I'm not an operator. I analyze evidence in a lab. I testify in court. I've never shot at a living person. I know, Webb said. I've never even been in a fight outside a training mat. I know. And you're asking me to go to Mexico and assassinate someone. Webb was quiet for a moment. Then, we're asking you to finish what your father started, to get justice for a good man who was murdered, and to save Ambassador Crawford's life. There are rules, Sarah said, laws, procedures. We don't just execute American citizens in foreign countries. Delgado stopped being an American citizen when he started working for the cartels, Flint said. There was an edge in his voice now, anger held carefully in check. He's been designated an enemy combatant by JSOC. There's a kill order on file. Has been since 2019. Your father's mission in 2020 was legal. Authorized. Someone canceled it. Someone protected Delgado. Then someone killed your father to keep him quiet. Sarah turned from the window. And if I say no, then Crawford dies, Webb said simply. We'll send a team. They'll do their best. But that compound is a fortress, and Delgado knows we're coming. The best case scenario is we extract Crawford with heavy casualties. Worst case is we lose the whole team and Crawford both. The shot from that ridge, Flint added, is the only way to do this clean. One bullet, Delgado dies. His organization falls apart. Crawford walks out alive. No American casualties. Except I'm not a trained operator. I don't know tactics. I don't know how to move in hostile territory. I'm a ballistics analyst who can shoot far. You're Jack Mitchell's daughter, Webb said. You've been trained by the best sniper in naval special warfare history since you were 12 years old. You know things about long-range shooting that operators with 20 years experience don't know. And this mission needs a shooter, not a soldier, a shooter. Sarah was quiet for a long time. The wood stove crackled. The river flowed. The mountains stood. She thought about her father, about all those mornings in these mountains, learning to read the wind, learning to feel the moment between heartbeats. She'd thought he was teaching her to hunt, teaching her a skill. She'd never imagined he was preparing her for something like this. I need to think, she said. Webb nodded. We have 60 hours before the deadline. The mission launches in 36. You don't have long. He and Flint moved toward the door, but Webb paused, reached into his jacket, pulled out a phone. This is encrypted. If you decide to help, call the only number in the contacts. We'll be at Fort Bliss, 45-minute flight from Boise. Sarah took the phone, looked at the metal case still sitting on her kitchen table. What if I can't make the shot? Flint turned back. His eyes were hard, the eyes of a man who'd seen combat, who'd lost friends, who'd lived with the weight of lethal decisions. Your father never doubted you, Flint said. Not once in all the years I knew him. He said you were the most naturally gifted shooter he'd ever seen. Said you could feel the wind ride the environment, make corrections that took other snipers years to learn. You were making 1,200-yard shots when you were 16 years old. Most Marine Scout snipers can't do that after a year of training. He paused at the door. Jack Mitchell died believing you could make the devil's head shot. Don't prove him wrong. Then they were gone. The SUVs pulled away down the gravel road. The sound of their engines faded into the vast Idaho silence. Sarah stood alone in her father's cabin. The Trident gleamed dully in the afternoon light. The notebook lay open to a page of her father's handwriting. Calculations, wind formulas, range cards, and the bullet. For the devil. She picked it up again, held it up to the light. 175 grains of copper and lead, subsonic powder charge, ballistic coefficient carefully calculated. Her father had built this round for one purpose. Sarah's phone buzzed, not the encrypted phone Webb had given her, her personal phone. It was a news alert, breaking news from the U.S.-Mexico border. She opened it. The headline made her chest tighten. Border crisis, American ambassador's captors release execution video. She clicked through, watched video that had been filmed in the last few hours. A man in security guard uniform. Hands bound, kneeling in dirt. His face was bloodied, terrified. A voice spoke off camera, accented English. Cold, professional. This is for the United States government. This is for Jack Mitchell's daughter, wherever she is. Your time is running out. 60 hours. Pay, or your ambassador dies like this guard, like your father died. The camera panned. A figure stepped into frame. Tall, bearded, salt and pepper hair. Marcus Delgado. He was holding a pistol. Without ceremony, without drama, he shot the guard in the head. The man dropped. The video cut to black. Then text appeared. Tell Sarah Mitchell I'm waiting. Let's see if the daughter is as good as the father, or if she dies the same way he did. Sarah watched the video 3 times. Each time her hands stayed steady. Her breathing stayed calm. On the 3rd viewing, she noticed something. In the background, just for a moment, she could see a guard tower. Adobe construction. Exactly like the photos in her father's notebook. She opened the notebook, found the page with the tower calculation. Her father's handwriting was meticulous. Range 1247.3 yards. Elevation 13.2, MOA 15 degrees angle. Wind average 12 to 15 mph. Target zone 9 inches head. Margin for error 2 inches. Note, this is the hardest shot I've ever calculated. Not because of the distance, because of what it means. Because of what happens if you miss. Sarah can make it. I've watched her shoot since she was 12. She has something I never had, something you can't teach. She feels the shot before she takes it. Knows if it's right, knows if it's wrong. Trust her. Beneath the calculations, her father had written one more line. Personal, not tactical. Baby girl, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. Sorry for training you for war when you wanted peace. Sorry for leaving you this burden. But I know you. You won't walk away. You can't. It's in your blood. Same as it was in mine. Make the shot. Save the man. End the devil. I love you. Sarah closed the notebook, picked up the encrypted phone Webb had left, looked at the single contact entry. She thought about the guard in the video, about Ambassador Crawford, about her father lying dead on a California mountainside while someone covered up the murder. She thought about Delgado's message, his challenge, his assumption that she would be too afraid or too weak or too inexperienced to come. Sarah Mitchell had spent 3 years trying to be normal, trying to be just a ballistics analyst, trying to forget that she was the daughter of the Phantom trained since childhood for something she'd never wanted. But Delgado had made a mistake. He'd thought she was weak because she was small, because she was civilian, because she was a woman. He'd thought wrong. Sarah dialed the number. It rang twice. Webb, it's Sarah Mitchell. I'm listening. One mission, she said. One shot. That's all I'll promise. I go in, I take Delgado, I come home. Then I'm done. Understood. And Commander, when this is over, I want answers. I want to know who canceled my father's mission, who killed him, who covered it up. You love it. You'll get them. You have my word. Sarah looked at the bullet in her hand. For the devil. When do I leave? There's a plane waiting in Boise. Be there in 2 hours. Pack light. We'll gear you up at Fort Bliss. Copy that. Sarareto. She hung up, stood in her father's cabin for another moment. This place had been her refuge for 3 years. Her escape from a world that expected her to move on, to forget to be normal. But she'd never been normal. She'd been trained by a legend, molded into something specific, prepared for one shot that her father knew he'd never take. Sarah packed quickly. Minimal clothes, her father's rifle, the custom ammunition she'd loaded, the notebook, the bullet, the trident. Before she left, she stood in front of her father's photo, the one from Iraq 2007, where he looked impossibly young and impossibly dangerous all at once. I'm going to finish it, she said to the photo, to her father's memory, to the empty cabin. One way or another, I'm going to end this. The mountains didn't answer. The river kept flowing. The October sun was setting over western Idaho as Sarah Mitchell locked the cabin door and drove toward whatever came next. She was 60 hours from either fulfilling her father's legacy or dying in the attempt to do so. And somewhere in Mexico, Marcus Delgado stood in his tower watching the dawn, not knowing that the Phantom's daughter was coming. The C-130 touched down at Fort Bliss just after midnight. Sarah had spent the flight studying her father's notebook, memorizing details. She'd need calculations. He'd made observations about Delgado's patterns and vulnerabilities. The base was dark except for scattered security lights. A single black SUV waited on the tarmac. Webb drove. Neither of them spoke during the 20-minute ride to a building on the far edge of the base. Low profile, no signs, the kind of structure that didn't officially exist. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over a tactical operations center. Maps covered the walls. Satellite imagery, drone footage. In the center of the room stood 3 men Sarah didn't recognize. Sarah Mitchell, Webb said, meet your team. The first man was lean and hard, early 40s, with the coiled energy of someone who never fully relaxed. His eyes assessed her with professional skepticism. Lieutenant Garrett Hawkins, he said, didn't offer his hand. SEAL Team 5, Breacher and Demo. The second man was older, 50s, quiet presence, watchful eyes that missed nothing. Emmett Dalton, he said. His voice was softer than the others, Southern accent. Most folks call me Doc. I keep people alive. The youngest was maybe 28, nervous energy, tech gear clipped to his vest. Petty Officer Brennan Sullivan, communications and tech. Everyone calls me Wires. Sarah nodded to each of them. She could feel Hawkins' skepticism like a physical weight, could see it in the way he stood arms crossed, jaw set. This is the shooter, Hawkins asked Webb. This is the shooter. She's what, 5'3", maybe 120 pounds. You're bringing a civilian analyst on a direct action mission in hostile territory. I'm bringing the best long-range shooter I know, Webb said. His voice had gone flat. Dangerous. You have a problem with that hawk, you can voice it now, or you can trust my judgment. Hawkins looked at Sarah, really looked at her. She held his gaze, didn't flinch, didn't look away. SEALs don't bring civilians on missions, Hawkins said, especially not women. This isn't a shooting competition. You're right, Sarah said. Her voice was calm, level. It's not a competition. It's a 1,247-yard shot at a 9-inch target with a human shield 18 inches away in variable wind conditions. Can you make that shot? I've made 1,000-yard shots. That's not what I asked. Silence hung in the room. Hawkins' jaw tightened. Your father was a good man, he said finally. One of the best. But being Jack Mitchell's daughter doesn't make you an operator. No, Sarah agreed. It makes me someone who's been training for one specific shot since I was 12 years old. You're here to breach and extract. I'm here to make sure you have time to do it. We each have our job. Flintstone stepped into the room. He'd changed into combat fatigues, looked 20 years younger in gear. She qualifies or she doesn't go, Flint said. Simple as that. There's a range set up outside. Hawk, you want to test her? Test her. But make it the real test, not the easy one. Hawkins studied Sarah for another long moment, then nodded. 1,000 yards. Cold bore shot. Winds running 12 to 15. You get one round, miss, and you stay here. Fair enough, Sarah said. The range was behind the building, temporary setup, steel targets at various distances. The furthest was a 12-inch plate at exactly 1,000 yards. The night air was cool, 95 degrees during the day, but the desert gave up heat fast after sunset. Sarah could feel the temperature on her skin, could feel the wind. Southwest, gusty. Hawkins pointed to the 1,000-yard target. There, one shot. Sarah opened the rifle case she'd brought from Idaho, her father's Remington 700. The woodstock gleamed dully under the range lights. She assembled it with practiced efficiency, mounted the scope, checked the turrets. From her pack, she pulled the Kestrel weather meter, held it up, let it sample the air. Temperature 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The metal had been sitting in the sun all day. Heat mirage would be a factor. Wind 13 miles per hour. Southwest. That made it roughly 90 degrees to her line of fire. Full value. Humidity 35%. Dry. Dense air. Elevation 3,800 feet. Lower than Idaho, but still significant. She pulled out her laser rangefinder. Painted the target. The display read 1,000.2 yards. The men watched her work. She was aware of their scrutiny, but didn't let it affect her process. This was familiar, comfortable. She'd done these calculations 10,000 times. Range confirmed at 1,000 yards, she said aloud. I'm shooting Federal Premium 168 grain Sierra Match King. Muzzle velocity 2,650 feet per second. She spoke clearly, wanted them to hear her process. Understand that this wasn't luck or guesswork. Elevation for drop at this range is 10.8 MOA, but at 95 degrees, my velocity increases roughly 10 feet per second for every 20 degrees above standard 59-degree conditions. That's 36 degrees above standard. Increases velocity by 18 feet per second. Reduces drop by 0.3 MOA. So I need 10.5 MOA elevation. Hawkins was watching her now with different eyes, still skeptical but paying attention. Wind is 13 miles per hour at 90 degrees. Full value crosswind. At 1,000 yards with my load, that's 14 inches of drift. 1.4 MOA. But the wind is gusting. I can see it in the mirage. I'll call it 1.5 MOA right to account for gusts. She dialed the turrets. Precise clicks. Humidity is 35%. Dry air is denser. Minimal effect, but I'll add 0.1 MOA to elevation to compensate. Another click. Coriolis effect. I'm shooting south. At this range, the Earth's rotation will drift the bullet approximately 2 inches right. That's 0.2 MO. Final adjustment. Total dope 10.6 MOA up. 1.7 or an MOA right. She went prone, settled the rifle into her shoulder. The bipod was steady on the concrete pad. She pressed her cheek to the stock, found the scope picture. The target swam in the reticle. 12 inches of steel. At this distance, it looked impossibly small. Sarah breathed, in through her nose, out through her mouth. Slow, controlled. She could hear her father's voice. Between heartbeats, baby girl. Her pulse throbbed in her neck. Steady, rhythmic, thump, pause, thump, pause. In the pause, she took up the trigger slack. 3.5 pounds of pressure, smooth, steady. The trigger broke clean. The rifle bucked. The suppressor reduced the sound to a sharp crack that echoed once across the desert and faded. Through the scope, Sarah watched. 1.4 seconds of flight time at this velocity. She could almost see the bullet's path. The trace of disrupted air. The steel target rang, clear and sharp in the night air. Dead center. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Brennan let out a low whistle. Holy shit. Hawkins walked to the spotting scope, looked downrange, confirmed what they'd all heard. Perfect center, he said. His voice had changed. Less skepticism, more respect. He walked back, stood over Sarah. She was still prone, still behind the rifle. That was impressive, Hawkins said, but that's not the test. He pointed up range, beyond the 1,000-yard target, partially obscured behind a berm. Another target, smaller, harder to see. 1,247 yards, Flint said quietly. Same distance as the tower in Mexico. Target is 9 inches, same size as a human head. Sarah felt something cold in her stomach. This was it, the real qualification, the shot her father had trained her for. She stood, moved to where she could see the target clearly. It was barely visible in the range lights, a dark circle against darker desert. What's the angle? She asked. 8 degrees downward, Flint said. Not as steep as the real shot, but close enough. Target's in a depression. Sarah pulled out the rangefinder again, painted the target through the darkness. 1,247.1 yards, exactly what her father had calculated. She checked the Kestrel again. Wind still 13 miles per hour, temperature now 96 degrees. The night was holding heat. This was a different calculation. Longer range, smaller target, angled to account for. 1,247 yards, she said aloud. Her voice was steady. Elevation for this range is approximately 13.2 MOA base. The 8-degree downward angle reduces the effective range. Subtract 0.8 MOA gives me 12.4 MO. She was working the math in her head, faster than anyone could check. Wind drift at this range is 22 inches. That's 1.7 MOA right. She dialed the turrets, heard them click. Temperature is still hot. Same correction as before. Minus 0.3 MOA. Click. The angle changes the Coriolis effect slightly. At this range and trajectory, add 0.3 MOA right. Final adjustment. Total dope, 12.1 MOA up. 2.0 MOA right. She went prone again. Found the target in the scope. It was significantly smaller than the first one. 9 inches at nearly 1,300 yards. The margin for error was minimal. Sarah controlled her breathing. Felt the wind on her face. It had shifted slightly. Still southwest, but maybe a degree or two more westerly. She adjusted her hold by a fraction. The target sat in her crosshairs. Steady, waiting, between heartbeats. Thump, pause, thump, pause. In the pause, she squeezed. The rifle fired. The bullet flew. 1.6 seconds of flight time at this distance. Subsonic by the time it reached the target. Affected by every breath of wind, every degree of temperature, every invisible force that could push lead off course. The target rang. Hit. Sarah stayed on the scope. Through the magnification, she could see the impact point. 2 inches from center. Not perfect, but well within the kill zone. She stood, ejected the spent casing. It pinged against the concrete. Hawkins was staring at her. So was Brennan. Even Doc looked impressed. Flint had binoculars up. He was glassing the target. After a moment, he lowered them. 2 inches right of center, he said, on a 9-inch target at 1,247 yards, in gusty wind, at night. He looked at Hawkins. She just made the devil's headshot, on a cold rifle. First time on this range, no warm-up rounds. Hawkins was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped forward, extended his hand. I was wrong, he said. You earned it. Welcome to the team. Sarah shook his hand. His grip was firm. Respectful. Your call sign is Phantom, Webb said. Just like your old man. You've earned that too. Back in the operations center, they gathered around the map table. Satellite imagery of the target compound filled the screen. Sarah studied it with new eyes. Professional eyes. This wasn't theory anymore. This was real. The compound sat 40 miles south of El Paso, deep in Chihuahua. Cartel country, adobe walls 8 feet high, guard towers at each corner, 3 main buildings. Intelligence shows 30 to 40 sicarios, Webb said. He pointed to the main house. Ambassador Crawford is being held here. 2nd floor, 4 armed guards minimum. Flint pulled up thermal imagery. Heat signatures move through the compound. Delgado's pattern hasn't changed in 3 years. Every morning at 06:30, he climbs the northwest tower, supervises the guard change, stays for 10 to 15 minutes. That's our window. He zoomed in on a ridge south of the compound. Sarah's position, 800 yards from the compound perimeter, 1247 yards to the tower. Perfect sight line, natural cover, mesquite and rock formations. Your father scouted this exact location in 2020. Sarah studied the ridge. She could see why her father chose it. Elevation advantage, multiple escape routes, concealment from the compound. How do I get there, she asked. Rio Grande, Hawkins said. He traced a route on the map. We insert 8 miles upstream. Zodiac boats, silent approach. You swim to shore here, climb the ridge, establish your hide. We'll give you 4 hours to get in position. What about you? We approach from the north, 400 yards from the compound. Wait for your shot. When Delgado drops, we breach and extract Crawford. Timeline, Sarah asked. Webb checked his watch. We launch at 0200, 6 hours from now. Gives you until 0630 to get in a position. That's 4.5 hours. Tight but doable. But Doc spread out equipment on a side table. Combat gear, weapons, tactical clothing. You'll carry the M24 as primary, he said. It's lighter than your Remington, better for movement. We've already zeroed it to match your dope. He showed her the rifle, military sniper system, familiar design. She'd trained on them at the FBI Academy. M4A1 carbine as secondary, suppressed, in case things go wrong and you need to fight your way out. Sig Sauer P2226 sidearm, standard seal issue. Night vision, PVS-14 monocular, weather meter, rangefinder, ballistic calculator as backup. 48 hours of rations. Water, medical kit. He paused. Total combat load is 62 pounds. On your frame, that's over 50% of your body weight. It's going to be hard. I'll manage, Sarah said. Flint handed her something else, a small pouch. Inside was the bullet her father had made. For the devil. Your father loaded this specifically for that shot. Use it. It's subsonic, quieter, less likely to give away your position. He tested it at that exact range dozens of times. Sarah held the bullet, felt the weight of history in it. Her father's hands had loaded this powder, seeded this bullet, engraved these words. What about extraction, she asked. Rally point 12 miles north, Webb said. He marked it on the map. Helicopter will be standing by. You make the shot, you move to this position. We'll have Crawford by then. All exfil together. And if I miss, the room went quiet. You won't miss, Flint said. But if I do, Hawkins answered. If you miss, Delgado goes to ground. We lose the element of surprise. The breach becomes a gunfight. Best case, we get Crawford, but take casualties. Worst case, we all die in Mexico, and nobody ever knows we were there. No pressure, Brennan muttered. Sarah looked at the satellite image again. The tower, the distance, the shot her father had calculated years ago. I won't miss, she said. They spent the next 3 hours rehearsing. Movement patterns, radio protocols, contingencies. Sarah memorized the compound layout, guard positions, timing windows. At 0130, they geared up. The combat clothing fit reasonably well. Adjustable straps helped. The plate carrier was heavy but distributed the weight across her torso. The M24 rifle slung across her back, M4 carbine on a single-point sling, Sig Sauer on her hip, night vision mounted to her helmet, comms unit in her ear. The weight was substantial but manageable. Doc helped her adjust the straps. How's it feel? Like I'm wearing a small car. He smiled slightly. You get used to it. Keep your core tight. Use your legs. Don't try to muscle it. Flynn appeared with a ghillie suit, not a full body suit, just components, strips of burlap and fabric that would break up her outline. You'll build the hide when you're in position. Use natural vegetation. Make it look like the environment. Your father's notes have detailed instructions. Sarah took the ghillie components, added them to her pack. Webb gathered the team. Comms check. One by one they verified their radios. Encrypted frequency, clear signal. Rules of engagement, Webb said. Minimize civilian casualties. Ambassador extraction is priority 1. Delgado is a kill-on-sight target, no prisoners. We go in quiet, we get Crawford. We get out. Questions. Nobody spoke. Mount up. The vehicles were waiting outside. 2 Humvees, desert tan, no markings. They drove south through the darkness. The base disappeared behind them. The desert opened up ahead. Sarah sat in the back of the lead vehicle. Hawkins was across from her, Doc beside her, Brennan in front with communications gear. "You scared?" Hawkins asked. Sarah considered the question. Was she? She'd killed the elk that morning without hesitation. But that was an animal. Delgado was a man, a human being. However terrible his crimes, pulling the trigger would mean taking a human life. "Yes," she said honestly. Hawkins nodded. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. The day you stop being scared is the day you make mistakes." "How many times have you done this, gone into combat?" 19 deployments, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, places that don't have names on maps. Lost count of the actual missions. "Does it get easier?" "No, it gets familiar. That's different than easy." The desert rolled past, dark and vast. They were off-road now, following GPS coordinates. No lights except the faint glow of the instrument panel. Sarah checked her gear for the 10th time. Rifle secure, ammunition loaded. The special bullet in a separate pouch on her chest rig. Weather meter functioning. Rangefinder charged. Her father's notebook was in a waterproof bag. She'd memorized the important pages but brought it anyway. Something about having his handwriting with her felt right. They reached the Rio Grande at 0200 exactly. The river was dark, moving slowly, maybe 60 yards wide at this point. The Zodiac boats were already inflated. Black rubber, silent electric motors. 2 boats, 3 men per boat. Sarah, Flint, and Doc in the first boat. Webb, Hawkins, and Brennan in the second. They launched without ceremony. The electric motors were nearly silent. Just a quiet hum beneath the sound of water moving. The river was cooler than the air. Sarah could feel it through her boots when she helped push the boat into the current. The water came up to her knees, then her waist. Then she was pulling herself over the gunnel and they were moving. Flint operated the motor. Doc sat amidships with a suppressed M4 scanning the banks. Sarah was in the bow. Her gear was heavy. The boat rode low in the water. The far bank grew closer. Mexico, cartel territory. No going back now. They beached the boats 400 yards apart. Sarah's team south, Webb's team north. The plan was to approach the compound from different angles. Sarah would move to the ridge alone. The assault team would position north for the breach. "Radio check," Flint whispered. "Phantom copies," Sarah said quietly. "Wires copies." Brennan's voice came through the earpiece. "Hawk copies." "Doc copies." "Webb copies. Everyone's green. Phantom, you're on your own from here. Move to position. Establish hide. Wait for dawn. Questions?" "Negative," Sarah said. "Good hunting." Sarah slipped over the side of the boat. The water was chest deep, cold. She felt it soak through her gear. The weight tried to pull her down. She fought it, found her footing, waded to shore. The bank was muddy, slippery. She pulled herself up using roots and rocks. The gear was even heavier now, waterlogged. She estimated 70 pounds total. Behind her, Doc gave a thumbs up. Then the boat melted back into the darkness. Sarah was alone. She checked her compass. The ridge was southeast, 800 yards through desert, elevation gain of 350 feet. She started moving. The terrain was rocky, scattered mesquite, prickly pear cactus. She moved slowly, deliberately, watching each footfall. The night vision turned the world into shades of green. Every 50 yards she paused, listened, scanned, moved again. It took 90 minutes to reach the base of the ridge. Longer than she'd hoped, but she couldn't risk moving faster. One twisted ankle would end the mission. The climb was steep, loose rock. She used her hands as much as her feet. The rifle kept catching on brush. The pack threw off her balance. Halfway up, she had to stop. Her legs were shaking, the weight was crushing. She could feel her heart hammering. This is what Dad meant, she thought. About the hard part, not the shot, the getting there. She forced herself to continue. One step, rest. One step, rest. Mechanical, relentless. At 04:15, she reached the position her father had marked. A natural hollow in the rocks. Mesquite growing thick on 3 sides. Clear line of sight to the compound below. Sarah dropped her pack, flexed her shoulders. Her whole body ached. She pulled out the rangefinder, painted the guard tower. The display read 1,247.3 yards, exactly what her father had measured. Sarah felt something cold and certain settle in her chest. She was in the right place. This was the position. The shot her father had calculated. The moment he'd prepared her for. She began constructing the hide, using the ghillie components and natural vegetation. creating a position that would blend into the landscape. The work was methodical, soothing in a way. By 0500, the hide was complete. She was invisible from the compound, could see out clearly but couldn't be seen. Sarah set up the M24, extended the bipod, checked the scope, dialed in the initial elevation and windage based on her father's notes. Then she settled in to wait. Dawn was still 90 minutes away. The desert was silent, dark. Through the night vision, she could see the compound below, lights burning in windows, guards moving on patrol, everything exactly as the intelligence had shown. She found the tower through the scope. Empty for now. Delgado wouldn't appear until 0630. Sarah breathed slowly, controlled, conserving energy, staying calm. This was the hard part, the waiting, the thinking, the knowing that in 90 minutes she would either make the most important shot of her life or fail spectacularly. Her radio crackled softly. Phantom Web. Status in position, range confirmed, waiting for dawn. Copy. We're 400 yards north, ready to breach on your signal. Roger. The sky began to lighten, imperceptibly at first. Then gradually, the stars faded. The darkness shifted to gray. Sarah checked the weather again. Temperature 68 degrees. Rising, wind 8 to 10 miles per hour. From the west, increasing as the sun warmed the air. Humidity 55%. The conditions were good, better than the test range. Wind was manageable. Temperature moderate. At 0600, movement in the compound. Guards changing shifts. Exactly as the intelligence predicted. Sarah's heart rate increased slightly. She controlled it. Breathed through it. At 0615, more movement. The main house. Someone coming out. Through the scope, Sarah watched. Not Delgado. A guard, walking toward the tower. Then another figure. Taller, moving with military bearing. Marcus Delgado. Sarah felt her hands tighten on the rifle. There he was, the man who'd killed her father. Who'd ordered the hit on the mountain road. Who'd walked free while Jack Mitchell was buried. Delgado crossed the compound, climbed the tower stairs. But he wasn't alone. Sarah's breath caught. A second man stumbled beside Delgado, hands bound, face bruised. Ambassador Crawford. Delgado was using Crawford as a human shield, just like her father had predicted in his notes. Sarah's radio crackled. Webb's voice, tense. Phantom, I have eyes on target. Confirmed Delgado has the ambassador with him. Confirmed, Sarah said. Her voice was steady despite the ice in her stomach. They're 18 inches apart, maybe less. Can you make the shot? Sarah looked through the scope. Delgado and Crawford stood on the tower platform. Delgado's head was visible. Clear target, 9 inches, but Crawford's head was right beside it. 18 inches of separation. At 1,247 yards, 18 inches was nothing. A gust of wind, a slight miscalculation. Any error would kill Crawford instead of Delgado. Phantom, can you make the shot? Sarah thought about the test range. The perfect center hit at 1,000 yards. The 2-inch group at 1247. She thought about her father, all those mornings in Idaho, all those calculations, all that training. This was the shot, the one he'd prepared her for, the impossible shot. Affirmative, Sarah said. I can make the shot. What's your confidence level? She watched Delgado through the scope, watched Crawford beside him, calculated the wind, the distance, the margin for error. 50-50, she said honestly. Silence on the radio, then Webb's voice. Abort. Too risky. We'll breach and extract. Negative, Sarah said. That's exactly what happened to Dad. Mission aborted. Delgado escaped. I'm not repeating history. Phantom, that's in order. Sarah's finger moved to the transmit button, but she didn't press it. Instead, she looked through the scope, studied the shot. Delgado's head, Crawford's head, the distance between them. Her father's voice in her memory. The hardest shots are not about distance. They're about consequence. Missing someone dies. But fear of missing causes misses. Trust your training. Sarah checked the wind one more time. It had increased slightly. 10 miles per hour now, steady from the west. She made her calculations. Final dope for the shot. And then she saw something that changed everything. Movement. On a second tower. 80 yards from Delgado's position. Another sniper. Rifle in hand. Watching the perimeter. Backup security. If she shot Delgado, the muzzle flash would give away her position. The backup sniper would have 3 seconds to react. 3 seconds to put rounds on Crawford before Webb's team could breach. Sarah needed 2 shots. Delgado first, backup sniper second. But she only had one bullet that mattered, her father's bullet, the subsonic round built specifically for this distance. She keyed the radio. "Webb, I have a problem." Webb's voice crackled in her ear. "Talk to me, Phantom." Second sniper, North Tower, 80 yards from Delgado's position. "If I take the primary shot, he'll have a clear angle on Crawford before you can breach." Silence for 3 seconds. Then Hawkins' voice tense. "Can you take both?" Sarah did the math. 1247 yards to Delgado, 1150 to the backup sniper. Two completely different elevations. Two different wind calls. She'd need to transition from the M24 to her M4 carbine. The M4 was less accurate at extreme range, but faster to acquire. "I need suppressing fire on the North Tower. 3-second window. I'll make both shots." "You're telling me you'll hit a 9-inch target at 1247 yards with an 18-inch margin for error, then transition to a secondary weapon and hit a moving target at 1150 yards in 3 seconds. "That's correct." Another pause. She could almost hear Webb calculating the odds. The risk. The consequences of failure. "Flint?" Webb asked. Flint's voice came through, calm, certain. "She's her father's daughter. She can make it." "Hawk, when Phantom fires, you light up that North Tower. Sustained fire for 3 seconds, then breach immediately." "Roger that." "Phantom, you're cleared hot. Your call on timing." Sarah settled deeper into her hide. The sun was rising behind her, golden light spreading across the desert. Perfect conditions for the shot. The air was still cool, the wind steady. Through the scope, Delgado stood on the tower platform, Crawford beside him. The ambassador looked beaten, exhausted, but alive. Delgado was talking to someone below. Gesturing, confident, he had no idea what was coming. Sarah checked her weather meter one final time. Temperature 74 degrees Fahrenheit, rising toward the heat of day. Wind 10 miles per hour, steady from the west. She could see it in the way the mesquite branches moved. Consistent, reliable. Humidity 50%, dropping as temperature increased. Barometric pressure 29.92 standard. The calculations ran through her mind automatically. Years of practice, thousands of shots. Her father's training ingrained so deep it was instinct. She ran the numbers one final time. Distance, angle, wind, temperature, every variable that could affect the shot. The math was second nature now, a language she spoke fluently. Final dope 13.1 MOA up. 1.85 MOA right. Sarah dialed the turrets, each click precise. Mechanical. She'd done this 10,000 times, but never when it mattered this much. The reticle settled on Delgado's head. She could see individual features through the magnification. His beard, the lines around his eyes. He was smiling at something. Ambassador Crawford stood rigid beside him, hands zip-tied, 18 inches between their heads. At this distance, that was a 2 MOA margin. One slight miscalculation, one unexpected gust, one tiny error in her math. Sarah's hands were steady, her breathing controlled, but her heart was pounding. She could feel it in her chest, in her throat, in her fingertips on the trigger. This was different than the elk, different than the test range. This was a human life in her crosshairs, however justified, however necessary. When she pulled this trigger, a man would die. Her father's voice came to her. Not a memory, something deeper, something that lived in her bones. Taking a life should never feel easy. The day it does, you've lost your humanity. She breathed. 3 deep breaths, slow and controlled, oxygenating her blood, calming her nervous system. Then she began the final sequence. Exhale slowly, let the air out. Don't force it. Natural, easy. Hold at the natural respiratory pause. That moment when the lungs are empty, but the body hasn't yet demanded another breath. Feel the heartbeat. Thump in her chest. Pause. Thump. Pause. The world exists between heartbeats. That's what her father had taught her. That fraction of a second when the body is perfectly still, when even the pulse isn't moving blood through arteries, when everything stops. Between heartbeats, impossible shots become possible. Sarah found that space, that pause, that perfect stillness. Her finger took up the slack in the trigger. 3.5 pounds of pressure. Smooth, steady, no jerking, no anticipation, just gradual increase until the sear released. She keyed the radio with her left hand. Phantom executing. 3, 2, 1, execute. The trigger broke. The rifle pulsed against her shoulder. The suppressor reduced the report but didn't eliminate it. A sharp crack that echoed once across the valley. Through the scope, Sarah stayed on target. She had to see the impact. Had to know if the shot was good before transitioning. 1.57 seconds of flight time. The bullet left the muzzle at 2630 feet per second, spinning at 3,156 rotations per minute from the barrel's 1 in 10 twist rate. The ballistic coefficient of 0.496 meant it would shed velocity predictably as it flew. For the first 900 yards, the bullet remained supersonic. Stable. Predictable. Between 900 and 1,100 yards, it transitioned through the transonic zone. This was the critical phase, where tiny imperfections in the bullet or slight variations in air density could cause instability. Her father had spent months perfecting this load to remain stable through transition. The final 147 yards were subsonic, slower, more affected by wind, but also quieter, less likely to give away her position. Gravity pulled the bullet down, 14.8 feet of total drop. Wind pushed it right, 21 inches. The Coriolis effect drifted it another 2 inches. Air resistance slowed it. By impact, the bullet had lost 55% of its kinetic energy. Sarah watched through the scope. The bullet's trace was barely visible, a shimmer in the morning air. Time seemed to stretch. That second and a half felt like an hour. The crosshair never moved from Delgado's temple. She held the sight picture, watched, waited. Impact. The bullet struck exactly where she'd aimed, Delgado's right temple, 3 inches from Ambassador Crawford's head. The hydrostatic shock was instantaneous. Delgado's head snapped right. His body went rigid for a fraction of a second, then collapsed. Crawford flinched violently but remained standing, unharmed. Sarah didn't celebrate, didn't feel relief. There was no time. She dropped the M24. Her hands found the M4 carbine already staged beside her. Brought it to her shoulder. The ACOG scope was simpler than the sniper optic, 4-power magnification. Less precise but faster to acquire. The backup sniper on the north tower was reacting. She could see him through the ACOG. He'd heard Delgado's suppressed shot, was turning with his rifle, searching for the source. Then Hawkins opened fire, suppressed rounds from 400 yards. Not accurate enough to hit the sniper at that range, but close enough to make him duck, make him move. The sniper dropped behind the tower's parapet, then rose again. Rifle coming up, searching for targets. Range to backup sniper 1,150 yards. Sarah had already ranged this position earlier, had the elevation memorized. 11.2 MOA. Wind was the same as the first shot, 1.5 MOA right. But the target was moving now, reacting to Hawkins's fire. That changed everything. No time for precise calculation. This was instinct, muscle memory. Years of training distilled into a single moment. Sarah led the target, estimated his movement, held 3 feet high to account for drop, held 2 feet right for wind and movement combined. The backup sniper's rifle was coming around, finding Ambassador Crawford in his scope. Sarah squeezed the trigger. The M4 barked, louder than the M24. The 5.56mm round left the muzzle at 2,900 feet per second, faster than the subsonic 308 but with less mass, more affected by wind at long range. Flight time 0.9 seconds. The backup sniper was still turning, still acquiring his target. Sarah's bullet flew true. Impact, not a headshot. Center mass, the sniper's chest. He jerked backward. The rifle fell from his hands. He collapsed behind the parapet. 2.2 seconds from her first shot to her second. Sarah's radio erupted with voices. Tango's down, breach, breach, breach. Explosions, Hawkins blowing the compound gate with breaching charges. Gunfire, not suppressed now, slash automatic. The assault team flooding into the compound. Through her scope, Sarah watched chaos unfold. Sicarios running, some shooting, most fleeing. They'd lost their leader, lost their command structure. Panic spread like fire. Webb's voice cut through the noise. Phantom, both targets neutralized. Good shooting. Cover our exfil. Sarah transitioned back to the M24, the longer-range precision rifle. She scanned the compound through the scope, looking for threats to her team. A Sicario appeared on a rooftop, AK-47 in hand, aiming toward where Webb's team was breaching. Sarah put the crosshair on his chest, led him slightly, squeezed. The rifle pulsed. The Sicario dropped. Another target, ground level, running toward the main house with an RPO. Sarah adjusted, fired. The man went down. She was operating on pure training now. Identify threat, assess, engage, move to next target. No emotion, no hesitation, just the mechanical execution of learned skills. Two more Sicarios tried to set up a machine gun position. She dropped both before they could get the weapon operational. We have Crawford, Doc's voice, strained but relieved. Ambassador is secure, multiple injuries but ambulatory, moving to exfil. Sarah kept scanning, kept covering. A Sicario with a rifle appeared in a second-floor window. She put him down before he could fire. Compound secure, Webb said. Phantom collapsed to rally point. Sarah began breaking down her position. Packed the M24, secured her gear. The spent casings from both shots went into her pocket. Evidence, but also something else. Proof that she'd done what her father couldn't. The hike down the ridge was faster than the climb up. Adrenaline carried her. She moved quickly through the desert, north toward the rally point. Behind her, the compound was chaos. Smoke rising, Sicarios scattering, but no pursuit. Nobody coming after her. She reached the Rio Grande at 07:15. The Zodiac boat was waiting, Flint at the motor. Get in, we're 30 seconds behind schedule. Sarah pulled herself over the gunwale, collapsed into the boat. Her whole body was shaking now. The adrenaline crash hitting hard. Flint gunned the motor. The boat surged across the river. Behind them, Mexico receded. Ahead, the American side grew closer. You made both shots, Flint said. Not a question, a statement of fact. Yes. 2.2 seconds between them. That's world-class kid. Your father would be so damn proud. Sarah didn't respond. She was watching the far bank, watching for pursuit, for threats. But there was nothing. Just empty desert in morning sun. They beached on the American side. The Humvees were waiting. Sarah stumbled getting out of the boat. Doc caught her arm. Easy, you're crashing. That's normal. Drink this. He handed her a bottle of water. She drank mechanically. The water was warm, but she barely tasted it. The second Zodiac appeared. Webb, Hawkins, and Brennan. Between them, supported on both sides, was Ambassador Crawford. He looked worse up close. Bruised face, split lip, dried blood on his shirt. But his eyes were clear, alert. He saw Sarah and stopped. You, he said. His voice was rough. You made that shot. Delgado was 18 inches from me. I felt the bullet pass. Sarah nodded, couldn't find words. Crawford stepped closer. Despite his injuries, despite everything, he gripped her shoulders. I've been in combat for 40 years, Crawford said. 3 tours in Iraq. I've seen incredible marksmanship, Medal of Honor recipients, the best snipers in the Army. But what you just did, 1,200 yards with a human shield 18 inches away, that was, he stopped, couldn't finish the sentence. His hands were shaking. Thank you, he said finally. His voice broke slightly. You saved my life, and you did it with the most impossible shot I've ever heard of. Ambassador, we need to move, Webb said gently. Medical evac is waiting at the rally point. They loaded into the Humvees. Sarah sat in back gear piled around her. Her father's notebook was still in its waterproof bag. She pulled it out, opened to the page with Delgado's calculations. Beside the numbers, her father had written something in the margin. Small handwriting, easy to miss. Sarah, if you're reading this after the shot, I'm so proud of you. You did something I couldn't. You made the impossible shot. You saved lives. You honored your training. That's all anyone can ask. Between heartbeats, baby girl. Always between heartbeats. Love, Dad. Sarah's eyes blurred. The first tears she'd shed since pulling the trigger. Not grief, something else. Relief, pride. The weight of living up to her father's legacy and finding she could carry it. The helicopter was waiting 12 miles north, a Black Hawk with medical personnel. They loaded Crawford first, then the team. Sarah was last aboard. As she climbed in, she looked back at Mexico, at the desert where she'd taken 2 lives and saved 1, where she'd become something she'd never wanted to be, an operator, a killer, her father's daughter in every sense. The helicopter lifted. The desert fell away below. Within minutes, they were over American airspace. Safe. Doc checked Sarah's vital signs. Blood pressure elevated, but not dangerous. Heart rate coming down. She was going to be fine physically. The mental part would take longer. They landed at Fort Bliss 40 minutes later. A medical team took Crawford immediately. The rest of them were debriefed in the same operations center where they'd planned the mission. Webb pulled up laptop footage, drone surveillance of the compound. Thermal imaging confirms Delgado KIA, backup sniper KIO, 23 Sicarios surrendered to Mexican authorities. 6 KIA, rest, scattered into desert. He switched to different footage. The tower platform. This is the shot. Watch the replay. Sarah watched herself pull the trigger, watched the bullet fly, watched Delgado drop, watched Crawford flinch, but survive. 18.3 inches, Webb said. That's how close the bullet passed to Crawford's head. 18.3 inches at 1,247 yards. I don't have words for what that is. Hawkins spoke up. I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. That was the finest shooting I've ever witnessed in 20 years of combat. You earned the trident today, Mitchell. You earned it 10 times over. Brennan nodded agreement. 2 shots in 2 seconds. Different range. Different weapons. Both hits. That's not luck. That's mastery. Your father would be proud, Flint said quietly. Hell, he is proud. Wherever he is. Webb pulled out something from a case. Sarah's father's trident. The one from the metal box. Jack wanted you to have this when you earned it. You just earned it. Phantom. Sarah took the trident, felt the weight of it. The gold was slightly tarnished. Her father had worn this for 30 years. Now it was hers. There's more, Webb said. His voice had changed, harder now. We recovered Delgado's laptop. Brennan cracked the encryption. Brennan pulled up files on the main screen. Emails, communications, financial records. Delgado wasn't working alone. He had a partner. American, former CIA, codename Vulture. He opened an email chain, messages between Delgado and someone with a government email address. The ambassador kidnapping was a diversion. The real plan was here. Images appeared. Maps, border crossings, truck routes. 3 simultaneous truck bomb attacks. El Paso, Laredo, and Nogales. Tomorrow morning, rush hour. Estimated casualties between 1,500 and 2,000 American civilians. Sarah felt ice in her stomach. They were going to. Kill thousands while everyone was focused on Crawford, Webb finished. Yes, but we stopped it. FBI and Border Patrol are rounding up the cells now. Trucks have been seized. Crisis averted. Because of you, Hawkins said, looking at Sarah. You didn't just save one man. You saved thousands of Americans who will never even know how close they came. Who's Vulture? Sarah asked. Her voice was cold. Webb's expression darkened. That took longer to figure out, but we have him now. Deputy Director Bradley Sutton, retired CIA 2019. He provided intelligence to Delgado, including your father's identity and location in March 2021. Sarah's hands clenched. He ordered the hit on my father. We believe so. Evidence shows Sutton received $2 million in cryptocurrency from Delgado the week before your father's accident. Sutton's in federal custody now. He'll face charges. Conspiracy to commit murder. Treason. Life in prison minimum. Possibly death penalty. I want to talk to him. That's not possible. He's in a black site, being interrogated by people who don't follow normal rules. By the time you could see him, there won't be much left to talk to. Commander, I need to look that man in the eyes. Webb studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll see what I can do, but not today. Today you need rest. Medical evaluation, full debrief. We'll talk about Sutton later. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Sarah spent 3 days at Fort Bliss being debriefed. Every detail of the mission, every decision, every shot. Intelligence analysts picked apart her actions, looked for lessons, for things to replicate. Ambassador Crawford recovered quickly. His injuries were superficial, mostly dehydration and bruising. He requested to meet with Sarah privately before she left. They met in a conference room. Just the two of them. I served with your father in Iraq, Crawford said. 2007. His SEAL team provided security for a diplomatic convoy I was on. We were ambushed outside Fallujah. Your father killed 3 insurgents in under 4 seconds. Saved all our lives. He paused, looked at Sarah with something like wonder. Now his daughter has saved my life, with a shot that defied physics, that defied possibility. You held my life in your hands with a margin measured in inches, and you didn't hesitate. I was trained for it, Sarah said simply. No, training doesn't explain what you did. That was something else, something rare. Your father had it too. That ability to do the impossible when it matters most. That's not training, that's gift. He handed her an envelope. I wrote this for you, don't read it now. Read it when you're back home, when you've had time to process what you did. Sarah took the envelope, thanked him. The Mitchell legacy, Crawford said, is one of honor and precision under pressure. You've carried it forward with grace. Whatever you choose to do next, know that you have respect at the highest levels of government, and know that you have my eternal gratitude. Sarah flew back to Idaho 2 weeks after the mission. Commercial flight, civilian clothes, looking like a ballistics analyst coming home from a conference. Nobody on the plane knew what she'd done, what she'd become. The cabin was exactly as she'd left it, the metal case still on the kitchen table, her father's photo on the mantel. She unpacked slowly, put her gear away. The M24 went in a locked case, the Sig Sauer in a safe. But her father's Remington 700 she left out, cleaned it carefully, oiled it, put it back in its place beside the door. That evening, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, poured herself a small bourbon, her father's favorite, Maker's Mark. She remembered Crawford's letter, pulled it from her pack. The envelope was worn from the journey home. She opened it carefully. Ambassador Crawford's handwriting was precise, diplomatic. Dear Sarah, in my 40 years of military and diplomatic service, I have never witnessed courage and skill like yours. You held my life in your hands with a margin of error measured in inches, and you didn't hesitate. That is not just marksmanship. That is character. Your father was a great man. I served with him in Iraq in 2007. He saved my convoy from ambush with 3 shots in under 4 seconds. Now his daughter has saved my life with the most impossible shot I've ever heard of. The Mitchell legacy is one of honor, duty, and precision under pressure. You have carried it forward with grace. Whatever path you choose, know that you have earned respect at the highest levels, and know that you have my eternal gratitude. If you ever need anything, you need only ask. With deepest respect, Ambassador Richard Crawford. Sarah folded the letter carefully, set it beside her father's trident on the mantel. Then she returned to the kitchen table with her father's notebook, turned to a blank page at the back, picked up a pen, started writing her own notes, her own calculations, her own observations about wind and distance and the space between heartbeats. The legacy continued, not because she had to carry it, but because she chose to. That night, Sarah hiked to the overlook above the cabin, the place where she'd scattered some of her father's ashes 3 years ago. She brought the trident, the shell casing from the shot that killed Delgado, a bottle of Maker's Mark. She'd had a brass plate made, engraved. She mounted it to the rock cairn that marked this place. Jack Phantom Mitchell, a Navy SEAL, 1975, 2021, scout sniper, father hero, between heartbeats. Baby girl mission status complete, Marcus Delgado, eliminated 247 yards. By Sarah Phantom. Mitchell, October 16, 2024. Sarah poured bourbon on the cairn. One for you, Dad. She set the trident on the plate, set the shell casing beside it. I made the shot, exactly how you taught me. Delgado's dead. Sutton's in prison. You're avenged. The wind moved through the pines. The Snake River flowed below. I don't know what to do now. You trained me for one shot, one mission. It's done, but I don't know if I can go back to analyzing bullets in a lab, pretending I'm normal. Pretending I didn't kill 2 men in 2 seconds. She sat on the rocks, looked at the sunset painting the mountains gold. I need a sign, Dad. Tell me what to do. Her phone rang, unknown number. She answered. Hello. Sarah Mitchell, a woman's voice. Professional. Military bearing. This is Commander Ellen Reeves, DevGru. Your name came through special channels. I wanted to call personally. Ma'am, I knew your father. We went through BUDS together in '97. He was the best natural shooter I ever saw. Commander Webb says you're better. I don't believe it. Sarah almost smiled. Is that a challenge, ma'am? It's an invitation. We need shooters who can make impossible shots. Operators who understand that precision saves lives. People like your father. People like you. Come prove me wrong. Sarah looked at the memorial, at her father's trident gleaming in the sunset light. When does selection start? January 15th, 2025. Coronado. Same place your father earned his trident. Sarah thought about the cabin, about her job in Boise, about the quiet life she tried to build, about pretending to be someone she wasn't. Then she thought about the shot, about Delgado dropping, about Crawford living, about 2,000 American civilians who would never know how close they came to death. I'll be there, she said. She hung up, looked at her father's photo on her phone, the one from Iraq where he looked impossibly young and impossibly dangerous. Okay, Dad, I'm in, one more time, but this time I'm doing it my way. She texted Webb. Phantom here, accepted DevGru invitation. Training starts January. His response came immediately. Proud of you, Phantom. Jack would be too. Sarah returned to the cabin, sat at the kitchen table with her father's notebook in the bourbon. The next morning, Sarah drove to the range behind the cabin, set up a target at 1,400 yards, further than the Delgado shot. Pushing herself, she ran the calculations. Temperature 45 degrees, wind 10 miles per hour, humidity 60%, elevation 14.8 MOA up, windage 1.5 MOA right, Coriolis zero point 0.2 MOA. She settled into position. Her father's rifle, her father's training, but her own skill, her own gift. Breathe. Between heartbeats, find that perfect stillness. Squeeze. The rifle fired, the bullet flew. Perfect arc across the valley. Impact. Dead center. Sarah smiled, whispered to the mountains, to her father's memory, to herself. I'm ready. The wind answered. The mountains stood. The river flowed. And somewhere in the vast American intelligence apparatus files were being created. Orders being written. Missions being planned that would need a shooter who could make impossible shots. The Phantom's daughter was no longer hiding in Idaho, no longer pretending to be normal. She'd found her purpose, her calling, the thing her father had seen in her since she was 12 years old. Between heartbeats, she would serve. Between heartbeats, she would protect. Between heartbeats, when the impossible shot was needed, she would be ready. Sarah Mitchell packed her gear, locked the cabin, drove toward Coronado and whatever came next. Behind her, the Snake River Valley held her father's memory, his legacy, his final shot made real through his daughter's hands. Ahead lay training, selection, missions that would test everything she was, everything she'd become. But she'd already passed the hardest test, the one that mattered most. She'd made the devil's headshot, and she'd done it exactly the way her father knew she would, between heartbeats. Perfect.